Have you ever looked at Robo Rally and sat there and said to yourself, you know what, this is a solid game, but I kind of want the person who draws the art for the Dixit cards to take a crack at this thing, to redesign it, because I certainly never did, but whoever designed Quodd Heroes definitely had that in mind. This is Quodd Heroes, designed by Ryan Iler, put out by Wonderment Games. And this is basically if you took out Robo Rally, Mechs vs. Minions, any one of those action programming style games, and then tossed it into a bizarre bundle full of powers, abilities, craziness, wackiness, game modes, all packed together. Because the core of this game is setting up different kind of movement tiles on your player board. You're gonna have different movement tiles that let your different quads roll in different directions. And from there, every turn begins with you taking a move and activating your tile depending on which face you land on. So perhaps I take a tumble in this direction, and because I'm on my left arm, I get to jump across, landing in the river, which has a current move, which moves me that way, which spins me that way, and now I'm all prepped for my next turn where I'm going to land on my feet, which lets me move diagonally, and boom, I'm on the one. That is Quodd Heroes. It's the idea that your hero boards are going to have, your quads or whatever they are, they're going to have boards in which you set up different programming mechanisms, different directions you can tumble, jump, slide, and do all that depending on which side of your quad you land on in your initial tumble, because that initial tumble is key. If you land on your head, well, now I can rearrange my various tiles on there and to potentially set up the next sequences of moves to hopefully get me the game. This game isn't Robo Rally in the sense that you aren't putting out 5 or 6 cards at once in order to achieve your goals. Rather, you are setting up your quad in a pattern of movement and then trying to think 5 moves ahead in order to achieve your goals. Because if I tumble forward, I'll be able to move to the left, and the next turn I'll tumble to the right, which will enable me to jump forward, which will put me on top of a wall where I could fall down on my next objective, picking up the gem, carrying it over here. You are constantly setting yourself up with these turns 3 or 4 moves out, trying to figure out how to optimize your way to your objective as fast as possible. And speaking of objectives, this game comes with a variety of player modes in which you can play solo, co-op, one versus many. You can play competitive, head-to-head. You can play it in a variety of different styles of game as well, in terms of pick up and deliver, pure racing, capture the flag, all these different aspects of the game. The game gives you a sandbox of a game, all based around that core concept of tumbling your quads around the game. It is chaotic madness, and if Robo Rally, if Mechs vs. Minions, if any of these games appeal to you in any way, I think Quodd Heroes is the next in that line, the next game that might be a good fit for your collection. Like I said already, it comes with various player modes, and those player modes, while I haven't tried all of them, from the ones I have tried, they have all been enjoyable. To a certain degree, I do prefer cooperative play, and we'll get to why later in the review, but all of them, including competitive, including racing each other, has been a fun way to play this game. The game has action programming, which I personally find immensely rewarding. I like the system. I like it when a game gives you a puzzle that you have to find your way through, whether that puzzle is more obscure in a Euro game like Vindication, whether it's a pure Euro game like Caverna, Feast for Odin, or whether it's a hybrid game in which you're trying to figure out which combination of powers and abilities. I generally like the puzzles that games give us, and Quodd Heroes gives you a clear puzzle every single game, in the sense that you have to figure out how to get from point A to point B, both with the board, however the board is set up, because you're going to have a ton of different tiles that you can set up and configure in different options, as well as the individual movement actions, as well as the upgrades you get to those movements, because some of these moves you'll be able to jump further, roll further, all those different things further as you upgrade those moves, as well as the cards you have, because you're going to get, again, different cards that you can add. You can get the Social Butterfly, where you'll be able to jump next to an opponent. You can get the Spring Launcher, where you can put a spring on the board that will enable you to jump. If you land on top of the spring, you get to jump somewhere else on the board. There's portals, there's tunnels, there's a whole bunch of things like that. There's a hoverboard, which lets you ignore pits and move over terrain things that would otherwise negatively affect you. There are a ton of cards added to this game that continuously add to that puzzle, because like I said, this game is one giant puzzle of you have an objective, whatever that objective might be. Let's take the simplest mode. The simplest mode in this game is going to be a clear race mode, which you can do both solo or competitive. You can race against the clock or race against an opponent to get to the end. That, by the way, is one of the areas where I do prefer the component as opposed to the solo. I like the opponent aspect more than the clock in the racing mode. But you have to get to a variety of spots on the board, going from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4. Racing around the board and figuring out which system of moves, how you tumble yourself, in which direction you tumble, with which cards and abilities, which will get you there faster than the clock or your opponent. It's all about seeing the pattern amongst these variables and seeing, well, if I stop here and reconfigure my tiles, then I'm set for a prime slate in which I can do this, this, and this. Additionally, each character will have their own unique ability that differentiates themselves from other characters, things that will make it slightly different compared to how, how someone else plays. You'll play differently. Combine that with the cards you have, and again, you'll play differently. Combine that with the upgrades you add to your movements, which movement slots you upgrade so that you can move further, jump further, and all that, and you will move differently. It has that uniqueness, that powers and abilities that I love so much in games, that complete combination of a variety of factors that make every single experience you play of this game drastically unique. The game comes with a great tutorial in the sense they slide you into those first 3 games as you learn mechanic after mechanic. You start off with a very basic mode, just moving around the board. You add some cards, you add some more cards. The game gives you a very good tutorial to get you from not knowing anything about the game to understanding that core concept. And that core concept, by the way, is everything. The entire game comes down to the idea that you tumble your quad in a certain direction, you land on a side, and depending on which side is now face up, you take that movement action on your board. That is the core gameplay. Everything else is fluff on top of that. Jumping into a portal to end up halfway across the board, or a tunnel or whatnot, that is amazingly fun, completely imbalanced, which we'll get to, amazingly fun, but it's the core gameplay is that tumbling aspect. And to that end, by the way, the game does give you duplicate quads. So you have 2 different quads, one that will go on the board, and the one you can have on your player board so you can math out which side is going to turn which way without having to constantly mess up and remember where your quad is. I've seen some comments about people who are wondering why they got 2 quads. That is why. So you can envision the way your quads move instead of having to mess up the player board. The art and the miniatures in this game are top notch as well. The art very much dives down and doubles down on that Dixit craziness of what's going on combined with Robo Rally. And then the miniatures. Have you ever seen such adorable little cube miniatures? These are your quads. These are the tiny little guys with tons of detail. I will note that they don't stand out from each other as much as I would like without painting them. At the end of the day, I mean, these are 2 different quads, and sure, they're different, but not necessarily at a glance. When I've played this game, it has happened a few times that we have accidentally moved one of those quads. But past that, give them a coat of paint, give them some sort of splash of color to make them stand out, and they will stand out pretty simply without having to go super detailed on those. But they're adorable little cubes, and it adds to the character this game has. Now, there are 2 things I don't like about quads. Maybe it's more than 2. I don't have exactly. But to begin with, like many games with this amount of content, this game could very heavily benefit from game trays or some sort of organizational system to this game. While I love the game and every time I pull out it has been epically fun, I do find that I don't pull it out as often as I'd like. Once I'm done with 3 or 4 sessions, I'm like, that was a blast. I'll pull it out next week. And then I pull out a different game. And then I pull out a different game. And 2 months go by, and then I finally pull this out and get it to the table. I'm like, that was so much fun. Why don't I play this more? And then rinse and repeat. Because I find games like this have so much stuff. You're pulling out your characters, you're pulling out the cards, you're figuring out how to how to organize the cards for this particular scenario, and then you pull out the tiles and set everything up. It's not completely crazy. It's just that there's so much stuff in this giant box. I mean, this box is thick. That is a thick box with tons of content in it. And every single time you play it, you have to mentally prep yourself for the setup and organization of the scenario you're going to play before you actually dive into it. You have to pull everything out of the box, kind of organize the table, set up your scenario, put everything back in the box. Then when you're done, you do the same thing, rinse and repeat. This is a game very much that could benefit from some sort of organizational system. I've looked, they don't even have broken token inserts for this game, and I definitely want something like that to make this game more accessible, to get to the table. Combined with that, kind of feeding off the same idea, the game is fiddly as anything. It is fun and strategy, and I love the game. Every decision you make does matter, which is one of the first things I look for in a game for it to be fun. But at the end of the day, it is also fiddly. There are so many different combinations of cards, abilities, and everything else that you'll find yourself very quickly overwhelmed with the sheer amounts of stuff you can do to actually get where you want, which is one of the reasons that with racing, I like the cooperative more than the clock, because the clock is almost arbitrary in terms of the cards, abilities, and combinations you get may or may not make that timer work for you. Versus playing against other players, it's a little bit more balanced in the sense that at least someone has to win. It's not going to be the game, it'll be someone, one of the 2 of you. But there's so many different things going on, so many different things affecting the way you move, affecting the game, that the actual components on the table to play the game, not overwhelming. Figuring out which cards to pull out, it's a little bit annoying, but the actual gameplay itself, a lot of things are affecting the way you move. A lot of small minutiae are affecting what should, in theory, be a constrained sandbox. At the end of the day is the furthest thing from constrained. This game lacks any real degree of balance or anything past the crazy chaotic mess that it is. And again, I like it, but it certainly can be overwhelming to a degree. And lastly, because of that aspect that I just touched upon, I don't recommend this game at higher player counts. I have enjoyed it solo, I've enjoyed it with 2, even with 3 a little bit, but I would say my preference is with 1 or 2 players. I like the solo aspect of trying to figure out what I'm doing as I sit there and not worry too much about taking more time trying to optimize my quad movement and rotate, and nope, if I do, let me plan 4 turns out. Oh, okay, great, that will work. So when I'm playing it solo, I can sit there and plan 4 turns out without worrying about how it impacts other players. When I'm playing it with 2, it's not so overwhelming and we can sit there and try to think things out. When you're playing with 3 and 4, there is no point planning past your last move, planning past your next move, because things will change so much. You can and will be pushed in this game. The game state will change. New terrain tiles will be added to the board. There's no point planning past your next move, which to a certain extent can be a good thing because it prevents that AP-ness, but it takes away the strategic long-term planning that this game might reward you for in 3, 4, 5 players or what have you. For myself, I found 1 and 2 players to be the sweet spot. I'm sure that experience will vary by players. As far as what I can see others not liking in this game, the rulebook is okay. It could use an improvement. It can use a little bit of cleanup, and I know they are coming out with 2nd edition coming soon to Kickstarter, and so I imagine that we'll see an updated rulebook there, updated cleanliness or orderliness. The game itself is very, very simple, and the rulebook manages to make it a little bit more complicated than it has to be. It's not a terrible rulebook, which is why I put this in the can see others not liking category, but it certainly could have been better and more streamlined. This is a classic example of a Kickstarter rulebook with a little less proofreading and eyes on it than otherwise could be. The game itself, like I said already, is a madhouse. I love it. I love that madhouse aspect of the game, but it is definitely, and the more players you add, everything gets so crazy so quickly. Putting various trampolines, tunnels, portals on the board, breaking walls, jumping over walls, moving from here, knocking people into whirlpools, turning, twisting, falling into pits. This game is a complete chaotic mess of a game. If that doesn't sound appealing, if everything I just said does not sound appealing to you, this game probably isn't for you. But if the idea of rolling your quad onto a trampoline that jumps you into a tunnel that ports you halfway across the board, where you proceed to land on the water pearl, roll into a whirlpool, fall that way, land in another spring, and hop back where you started, if that sounds like something that would be fun for you, then this game probably is for you. That kind of chaos is exactly what Quodd Heroes delivers in spades, which is going to very much make it right for some people like myself, and wrong for others. And if you have trouble visualizing how that stuff will play out, then this also might just not be a game for you. The visualization, the planning, the thinking through how 3, 4 turns down the road, you're going to be able to pull off this masterpiece of a move where you simultaneously knock 2, 3 spots in a row. This might not be for you. If you can't sit there and visualize how you're going to move your quad one way, end up in a different spot, and be prepped for 2, 3 turns, then the reward aspect of this game, the main fun, what I consider the most appealing aspect, just won't be there for you. And additionally, this game is going to, for the same exact reason, this game is going to be AP prone to a degree. Analysis paralysis, the idea that people can sit there looking at their board for an intense amount of time, trying to optimize out the perfect move. In general, in playing this with 2 players, we had a general rule going where try to visualize out 1 or 2 moves, but try not to go further than that. Try to be respectful of each other's time as you plan out your move and optimize it to a certain degree, but don't go overboard. But if you don't have some sort of, gentleman's agreement in place in terms of not having crazy whatevers, you could be stuck staring at the board for 7, 8 minutes while your teammate or opponent or whoever it is plans out that perfect move. And then lastly, and this will be a big one and it's certainly worth mentioning, this game, in my opinion, is not fair or balanced at all. This is why I mentioned to some degree I prefer the co-op elements than I do to the cooperative, than the competitive elements. And that's because, to a certain degree, this game is not balanced. You will draw a card, a combination of cards, place them down the board, and have crazy turns compared to what someone else will do. That aspect of jumping through a trampoline to land here, to land in a tunnel, to return back to here, to land in a whirlpool, to do whatever. It is completely insane, the levels of chaos this game provides, and I don't think I would call it a balanced experience, including the player powers as well. The various quad powers, they range from being, amazing to, I don't know why that affects me more than it affects them. So the game isn't what I would call a balanced, refined game. It is very much what I would call a crazy madhouse of a game with a ton of potential as you sit there and optimize your way towards some sort of something that just feels so immensely rewarding when you do it. As far as my final thoughts on Quodd Quodd Heroes is exactly the kind of game that I enjoy, but it's very much not a game for everyone. I love the puzzle that games give you. I love the optimization of being given a set of constraints and having to try to find and iterate your way towards some sort of victory. I love when a game does that. To me, the fact that the game is or isn't balanced doesn't particularly bother me, especially in the crazy chaos that this gives, and also for the time frame. You can knock out games of Quodd Heroes in anywhere between 30 to 60 minutes. I think they have longer missions as well. I don't know if I've ever played any of the longer ones, but for me, I've consistently been having these games in 30 to 60 minutes, and that lack of balance doesn't particularly bother me. It is fun and chaos as we sit there and get in each other's way and knock into each other's quads and have those epic moments where you have an incredibly powerful move and you're just sitting there going like, well, I guess you win. The game is great for me. Like I said, it's not necessarily going to be great for you if that doesn't sound like it's a thing for you. My biggest complaint personally about Quodd Heroes is what I touched upon already. That this game, as much as I like it, as much as I enjoy it, and as much as the fact that it only plays in roughly 30-60 minutes a session, I find myself not bothering to pull this one out unless I know that I'm going to give it 3-4 hours of play over, or it doesn't have to be all at once, it might be over a few days, but unless I know that I'm going to give it the time and attention it deserves to put everything out, figure out the scenario setup, move from one scenario to the next and enjoy it, I find that the frustration or the annoyance, the legwork of getting it set up and torn down is out of proportion to that 30-minute journey, and so I don't bother pulling it out as often as I would otherwise like with this game. And that is going to tie into the longevity and place in my collection, because for me, Quodd Heroes is very much a game in my collection. I am looking forward to the second Kickstarter. I will likely be getting all the new content. I don't know if I'll be getting an upgrade pack. I don't know exactly how to play out, but I'll be getting a lot of the stuff. But as far as the longevity of my collection, Quodd Heroes does fall into one of those zones, similar to many of these big box games, similar to games like Besiege, or I don't know what else I have on my shelf, I don't know, I have to take a look, but games that are so overwhelming in the amount of stuff going on in the game, that even though I like it a ton, I don't pull it out as much as I would like. I think Quodd Heroes will be in my collection for a long time. I don't know how long is in this case. It may well depend on whether there are additional game trays or insorts or storage solutions in this upcoming Kickstarter, and if not, I'll probably take a look online and see if I can print my own 3D printing option out there. I like this game a lot, and the idea of being able to get it to the table more often, more frequently, by reducing that barrier to accessibility, I like it. I do. If I could play this 30 minutes at a shot, I think this would stay in my collection for a very, very long time. That's basically been my review of Quodd Heroes, an epic, crazy madhouse of a game, an experience I love with a barrier to entry that is a little bit problematic, and a degree of chaos and lack of balance that might just make it not a game for you. Until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you enjoyed this video, and give these quads a gander. Who says the word gander anymore? I don't know what that even means. Until next time, have a good one.